Hello, welcome to Trying Times. My name is Carmen and I'm your host slash friend. And if you're here for the first time, then hey, we're friends now. Don't know if you knew that, but now we're friends. So yeah, welcome. I don't know how else to segue from that. So, in the last episode, we had talked a lot about nostalgia behind the season of summer and how it was always so exciting as a kid, specifically. And honestly, it got me thinking. The way that I experienced summer when I was a kid differed to a degree, I think, from how kids now experience summer. And I think a lot of that is due to obviously the evolution of technology. And I think obviously that's incredible in itself. To a degree, it enriches what they experience, and at the same time, it takes away, I think, from what they could experience when you think about it in terms of how previous generations experienced life without obviously this need for documenting it all or publicizing it to a degree. And so I think going off of that, it's hard to sometimes separate our own expectations from what we're really enjoying to what we believe we should be enjoying, or better yet, the expectations we place on ourselves in comparison to some of those who are maybe the same age as us but are incredibly successful from what we see online. So, I'm not gonna lie, I saw this TikTok, and this is kind of what got my brain going on about this a little bit. But it was this TikTok by this incredibly talented person about the never ending loop of how we scroll through social media regularly. And it really inspired me to talk about this more, which is funny because this whole episode is about social media, and I discovered that on social media. So, I kind of like when that stuff happens where I know I'm online and scrolling a little bit more than I'd like to admit, but then a post will pop up that kind of clocks me for that because I think that's so ironic and kind of just perfect in terms of timing in itself. I think whilst I'm in the beginning stages, wow. I didn't expect that to come out of my mouth. I think whilst I'm in the beginning stages of this topic, I want to say that I do think social media is, in many ways, a highlight reel for a lot of us because that is kind of what we prefer to share on there. And we turn to it most of the time to post our brightest moments in life, and sometimes maybe some tough ones that have been pivotal to some degree in our lives, whether it's with growth, lessons, and so forth. So from there, we're able to sort of see through the filters and numbers of followers that people deem so important and vital to life now. And I remember when I was growing up, social media was very much still in its early stages of forming and establishing. I can't talk. So I remember when I was growing up that social media was very much still in its early stages of forming and establishing itself within the world. And at this point in time, to communicate, many of us were just calling each other. Believe it or not, I hate talking on the phone now, which is like the funniest thing because if I needed to reach a friend or a relative, whoever it may be, the only way I really could reach them was by calling them, which is funny now because I hate talking on the phone. If you're a good friend of mine, you know that I don't often answer the phone. And that's not against any person in particular. That's just because to be honest, I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb a lot of the time, which is a really bad habit. I shouldn't be doing that, but I do. So I'm just going to air that out here for myself. It's fine. I like to keep my phone on Do Not Disturb. That way, if I'm with my phone, which is usually with me most of the time, I don't see notifications right when they pop up. It feels a little less overwhelming for me. I guess going off of that tangent too, I don't have any notifications turned on for social media. I prefer to just kind of go onto the app when I'm on it and see what's on there when I'm on there versus like getting those notifications 24/7 and then kind of having that force me to go on the app. So that's my spiel. But basically, when I was younger, I sound so old. When I was younger, at that point in time, like to communicate, many of us were just calling each other and then texting a bit or just seeing each other in person. There was no way to know what like Sally from grade 3 was doing in her life now because you were just disconnected. And I kind of love that. So, in a way, if you were disconnected from someone in real life, there was no connection or any way for you to know what this person was up to later on in life or years later. And I think the only way that you knew of what someone was doing was by hearing about it through a grapevine type thing. Whereas now with the ease of access to everyone's lives, it is so insanely easy that it's kind of almost sad. Like, I don't know. There's a ton of people that I'm sure you have on social media. I can speak for myself in this as well, who I do not talk to regularly. I frankly don't even really keep in touch with properly. And I have them on social media. And it's kind of a weird thing when you think about it. It's like, why are we adding people online? Anyways, that's a whole other thing. But so going off of that ease of access, I think when I was in about grade 6 or 7, this new platform emerged and everyone was so excited about this. It was this way for everyone to connect with all of your friends and family from all over the world, to share your life online, and to even form new relationships with people you didn't know in real life, which is sort of scary, but c'est la vie, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, basically what I'm talking about is Facebook. Facebook emerged, and slowly but surely everyone I knew was on there with a profile and posting back and forth on each other's walls. That was the big thing at the time, which is such a weird thing to think about now, but I mean, it was big at one point. So there's that. I think that was kind of like the pivotal moment when I was growing up, when social media kind of really became established amongst my generation in a way, and also the generations ahead of mine. So I think to a very big degree, being part of that site felt like you were part of some kind of movement, because it was just this new thing. You were consistently part of this conversation. And even though I can say a lot of those conversations didn't feel like much, or don't now at least, it was a very big deal at the time. And if you weren't on Facebook, you weren't really part of that conversation. And from what I can remember, this lasted years. And I hadn't gotten it till I was about 13 years old. To be honest, I wish I hadn't gotten it till later because of the wave of embarrassing statuses and very bad edits that myself and a lot of us were posting at this point in time. We really thought we were doing something wild and different, but it was just honestly very embarrassing. Thinking about it now, I kind of wish that was never a thing. So there was that. And then up until I was in about, I think, grade 10, everyone was on and on about Facebook. Then another thing came about, and it wasn't a site, it was an app for your phone. So this app was a place for people to communicate in a new way. And we were all here posting pictures and videos and liking and commenting on others' posts to be part of this movement now. And I think it wasn't necessarily the same situation of writing on other people's walls and chatting through a messenger. So though it took a little while for people to transition, they eventually did, and that's when Instagram took the world by storm. It was similar to a degree with communicating with your friends, and I think, updating things as Facebook, but it was also totally different in itself because it didn't offer the same degree, I think, of accessibility, at least not right away. Things like DMs weren't a thing right away. I remember even for a little bit, I don't think you could post videos on there. I think it was strictly just photos. You could like and comment, I believe, from like the get-go, but obviously things like stories were not a thing. You couldn't DM, you couldn't share posts, you couldn't, like, all that stuff. You couldn't save posts. There was a lot that wasn't part of the app at first that is there now. So people started, I think, creating personal accounts to represent themselves, of course, and then there were celebrities who were quote unquote representing themselves, and that introduced the world of verification. So now this totally differed, I think, in a lot of ways. I could be crossing my wires from Facebook because this level of authenticity that a lot of people began to crave kind of established itself within social media. And so from everything like a blue check mark to a page that you may have created to share pictures of your pet with the world, it was all that a lot of us focused on, truthfully. And I think there were other apps that also did this that I'm not mentioning, such as Twitter and so forth. But this app was by far one of my favorites, and I'm fully aware of its downfalls as well. It, I think, has taken over a lot of how we as humans socialize now, or at least functions as a buffer for socializing. And in addition to technology and smartphones as a whole, to be honest. So when I was growing up, we had a different world of technology in itself. We had Tamagotchis and Neopets and then that slowly evolved to Webkins, and then finally like iPod Touches were a thing, which made something like Facebook easier to access, and then later on made something like Instagram even easier to access and post on. So in focusing on this for so long as an adolescent, we learned to care for these toys or virtual pets, which really did take priority to other commitments. Webkins was life, I'm not gonna lie. And I cannot forget Club Penguin. Both of those things, ride or die. Loved them so much. Honestly, still love Club Penguin. It's not the same as it was before, but it's still poppin', I guess. So I think going off of those prior commitments, we kind of grew up to understand how we wanted to present ourselves to the world through something like social media. And don't get me wrong, there were obviously kids and preteens interested in their appearance at this time, but it wasn't necessarily influenced as heavily, I think, through something like Instagram and filters. And a lot of kids when I was that age kind of like bypassed this uncomfortable phase of being influenced by that and feeling, I guess, pressure from that. Whereas like we had, magazines, music, just general media like film, TV, commercials, infomercials, that kind of stuff that push certain products. Whereas now I think with something like Instagram and all these filters and TikTok with even more filters and Snapchat and whatever else it is, it kind of pushes kids to worry a lot more about their appearance constantly and feel sometimes a little lesser than because they don't look the way that they want to look without a filter. And that is really upsetting to think about. And I can't imagine the pressure that a lot of these kids might go through because it's like, I'm trying to think of how to word it. It's kind of helping kids, I think, to a degree, bypass this uncomfortable appearance-related phase that we all just kind of have to go through. So I'm going to straight up say I went through my ugly phase. And it's funny to say, but like when I'm chatting with friends, it's interesting to see how many times we realize that kids nowadays don't really go through that awkward or uncomfortable phase like we did. Like it just they kind of sort of bypass it. And I think a lot of that is due to trends and owed to the fact that, they're very cyclical and in the forefront. And so with a thing like social media being so predominant and prevalent in their lives, those trends are all that much more accessible. Now kids are growing up with all kinds of media, which makes these trends and that feeling of importance in appearance much more drastic than ever before. Not to mention, it is so much more interactive than ever before. Like when I was growing up, we did not have filters. We had like Barbie.com and I'm trying to think of what else. Do you guys remember like Sun-In, like the hairspray? If you had dark hair, there was this spray called Sun-In. And I think about it now, I loved it as a kid. Probably wasn't the greatest for you. It was basically this thing you sprayed in your hair, and then if you sat in the sun, it would lighten your hair. Or so it claimed it would lighten your hair. So like I had that. I had colorful, artificial colored hair extensions that I would just like to clip into my hair because why not? And like, I don't know, Ray-Bans, but like the knockoffs of Ray-Bans were popping because, I don't know, it was like what the Jonas Brothers are wearing. That's what I was into as a kid. Whereas now, they're very much like able to kind of look and try any look that they want. So they can look any way they want, try out any look that they want. Whether they make that permanent or not is up to them. I think we have learned through this to present ourselves as we wish to be seen online now, which is really interesting as a point. Wait, so before I carry on, we're at about the midpoint of this episode, and I wanted to remind you to follow and subscribe to the show so that you're always notified when a new episode comes out. This show is released weekly, so there's a lot you don't want to miss. So go ahead and do that. Okay? Thank you. Love you. Carrying on now. So with all of these apps and sites, that means that the level of our lives being documented has gone up in a way that has never been a thing before. I think the most recent generations have been able to access archives of their childhood online through family members and start their very own documentation on their own profiles and pages. And I think often about some of the ways in which I'm grateful for the lack of online documentation when I was growing up or when I was way younger, because it's kept close to home and within family as it feels right, to be honest, at least for me. And I know there are a lot of people who love to share that online, and that's all right too. But so I think along with Facebook and Instagram, there's a lot of documenting. And now TikTok is here and bigger than ever, and this is a whole new world of documentation. And by the way, I'm aware, like I said earlier, I'm not talking about a few apps here like Twitter and Vine. Oh, I remember Vine. I loved Vine. Anyways, I'm aware I'm not talking about a lot of those apps, and I'm generally skimming through, but I'm just kind of trying to focus on the apps I see the most in the forefront at the moment. This may not be the most accurate for you. Maybe there's apps I'm not even mentioning at all in this episode that are very, very important to you. So feel free to share that with me over on Instagram if you'd like, at the Trying Times Podcast. Okay. TikTok, I think, though, the reason I keep mentioning it has been all about trends and therefore encouraging its users to participate in the ever-changing trends that exist there. And I feel like when we break down all of this, we can realize how this impacts us as humans. So for adults, we begin to feel connected to some trends and positive, and then maybe removed from others and a little poorer of ourselves because it is hard to keep up. And then for kids, they tend to relate to many of the trends we see on the app, and that gives them a positive bias, from what I think at least. And they feel part of something and therefore maybe feel better about themselves, or feel, like obviously if they're part of something, they feel included. And on top of that, that could mean a number of things. When they go home from school, the socialization aspect of their lives is never entirely turned off. The participation in trends is never turned off, which could also mean that the critical aspect is also never turned off. So bullying, I know when I was in high school, was very much also cyber as much as it was IRL in real life. I feel really old when I say IRL, but anyways, bullying now I think is at a different high than ever because people are more connected than ever before. And it's almost to a point where they're, to a degree, dare I say, too connected. There are so many highs and lows existing at the same time, and that's what's so baffling to me. So I can honestly say when I was growing up with social media that being able to document my life and receiving those likes and comments was sort of a thrilling thing. And I think that's what it is for a lot of people. And there are a number of articles out there that talk about the euphoric effects that receiving that online validation provides for people. And it's almost drug-like, which is really scary when you read into it and talk about it, because it's kind of providing, again, that euphoric effect to someone of any age who, may not be exposed to those things or may not be trying those things. And it's like a different thrill from anything else that they've felt. And so now I feel like for kids, there are so many apps and platforms that it's near impossible to keep track of. And I wonder if a lot of this either provides them with a feeling of free self-expression, or if it takes away from a lot of the life experiences that they may be having and the way that they wish to present themselves. And it's just that everything is out there on the internet, and I can't imagine it, but in many ways that might feel suffocating or overwhelming. And again, for me, growing up with social media on the come up, sometimes it felt overwhelming, but I think I chose to stick to the excitement in it more than anything because it was something we were all experiencing for the first time. But now I feel like I get more overwhelmed because there's always something new. And whatever we do know well and have known is changing. And it feels like it's so much to keep up with all the time. So I want to ask you, do you sometimes find social media overwhelming? If you do, in what ways do you find it can be draining? Whether, that's emotionally, mentally, really in any way. So I want to hear from you. Feel free to leave me a voicemail at the link in the episode description, or send a message over on Instagram at the Trying Times Podcast, and I will be getting back to you. The irony in the fact that I just sort of talked about social media and talked down on it and then said, hey, let's connect through there, says enough, I think. I'm gonna log off today. I'm gonna just try to stay off social media altogether today. So that's all for now, and thank you so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed. So we'll chat soon, okay? Bye.